Okay, so today we'll talk about why you should never choose a blanket approach across your organisation for your IT operating model. This is actually a common mistake in most organisations, and it's not an either-or option. So each of these operating models should really be considered on a service-by-service basis, if that should be an ops run it or a you build it, you run it approach. And here's why. So let's look at the requirements of a national retailer and discuss what their requirements would be specifically for deployment throughput and reliability. So they're going to have a high requirement for the speed to market. And the reasons for that are specifically if they're selling B2C, the expectations of their customers is to have new features and new products and offers available to them quite frequently and often. They also have to cope with high peaks in traffic, both during the day and on peak events. So for example, you may only need high resiliency when people are actually shopping during the day, not at night, unless you're a global retailer like Amazon, for example. But you also need to cope with those peak sale periods, things like Christmas and Black Friday. You're going to need really high resiliency at those times. In that example, you build it, you run it is perfect for that area in that organisation, and it gives them the speed of market to get things out to customers quickly. It also provides a highly resilient system, which means they're not financially exposed in the event of a system failure. And this would be perfect to apply for their digital services. But if we were to apply that same context in the retailer, but now look at their order management system, for example, rather than their digital services, we can really see where we can apply some different rules. So if we look at the rate of change in an order management system, that rate of change is much smaller. And that's because that's a well-established and thought-through process that really looks at the picking, the packing and the shipping of orders. The reliability requirements are also lower because the people that need to do that picking, packing and shipping really work mainly by day, so it only needs to be up and available for them during this time. Therefore, you could feasibly run the order management system in an ops run it model because your throughput changes are lower and your requirements for reliability are also lower. Rather than a retailer now, let's consider looking at a bank. The requirement for you build it, you run it is actually quite similar here. And the reasons for that is there are some parts of the banking system that do require you build it, you run it. Let's look at their digital services, so their mobile apps or their online experience, where customers want to see things like their balances or where they want to make payments. Well, that needs to be highly available. And there's also a clear requirement and benefit to the bank to be able to add new products quickly. Example, a new home loan product or even new bank accounts. Maybe even changing the rules around who can get access to what from a bank account. So for that reason, you're going to need to have a high throughput. And due to regulatory reasons, you're going to need those changes to be well tracked and audited, which is really best served through you build it, you run it with high automation. But there are some parts of the bank that don't need to change that often. Things like your core banking solution, how you ledger, how you can count money in and out. Those aspects of the system, they need to be highly available, but they don't need to have a high throughput of change. There's not that requirement to make changes as often because that's a well-established process. For those core aspects of the system, you may not need to go down the you build it, you run it approach because there aren't the same requirements for those applications. So my take-home message for you is to not think about your operating model as a blanket approach across all of your service. Either all ops run it or you build it, you run it. You really need to start looking at it and assessing it on a digital service level. You can see how the retailer might have a large percentage of their services running on you build it, you run it compared to a bank, and that will be the same for your organisation as well. It's a blend based on your organisation and your services and what's really right for you. So it's a common mistake to overinvest in you build it, you run it when it's not necessary. But it's even more common putting ops run it everywhere and not seeing the benefit that you build it, you run it could bring to you. And if you exclusively go with either ops run it or you build it, you run it, you really are denying yourself the value that the operating model for that service could bring you. So if you're wanting to know how to start assessing which of your services might benefit from You Build It, You Run It, then like this video or head to my channel and subscribe for more help on your You Build It, You Run It journey, where more videos will be available.